Welcome to True Crime Cases, where we delve into the darkest corners of human nature. Today's episode unravels a tale of newlywed husband, discovers his wife is a trans, ends in grisly murder. The case begins with Darius Callahan, a 32-year-old software engineer who had recently moved to Millbrook from bustling Chicago. Darius was tall and handsome, with piercing blue eyes and a charming smile that quickly endeared him to his new neighbors. He had come to Kentucky seeking a quieter life, away from the constant noise and pressure of the big city. What he found instead was love in the form of Ciara Harper, a 28-year-old local schoolteacher. Ciara was beloved in Millbrook. With her long auburn hair, warm brown eyes, and infectious laugh, she had a way of lighting up any room she entered. She taught third grade at Millbrook Elementary and was known for her creativity and dedication to her students. Ciara had grown up in Millbrook, and, unlike many of her peers who had left for bigger cities, she had chosen to stay and give back to the community that had raised her. Darius and Ciara's whirlwind romance was the talk of the town. They met at a local farmer's market, where Ciara was volunteering at a booth selling homemade jams and preserves. Darius, still new to town and eager to meet people, struck up a conversation with her. From that moment on, they were inseparable. Their courtship was swift and passionate. Darius was captivated by Ciara's warmth and zest for life, while Ciara was drawn to Darius's intelligence and the exciting stories he shared of his life in Chicago. Within 6 months of their first meeting, Darius proposed on a moonlit night by the town's picturesque lake. Ciara, tears of joy streaming down her face, said yes without hesitation. The wedding, held in the spring of 2023, was a grand affair by Millbrook standards. The entire town seemed to turn out to celebrate the union of one of their own with the charming newcomer. The ceremony took place in the town's historic church, with its white steeple reaching towards the clear blue Kentucky sky. Ciara was radiant in a flowing white gown, her eyes never leaving Darius as they exchanged their vows. The reception was held at the Millbrook Community Center. Decorated with strings of twinkling lights and bouquets of wildflowers, the air was filled with the sound of laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses, as toast after toast was made to the happy couple. As Darius and Ciara shared their first dance, many remarked on how perfect they seemed together, like two pieces of a puzzle, finally united. But beneath the surface of this picture-perfect romance, a secret lurked, one that would ultimately lead to tragedy. In the weeks following their honeymoon, a subtle shift began to occur in Darius and Ciara's relationship. Friends noticed that Darius seemed more withdrawn, often lost in thought. Ciara, always quick with a smile, appeared strained and anxious. Those closest to the couple chalked it up to the normal stresses of newlywed life and adjusting to living together. What no one knew was that Darius had discovered something about Ciara, something that shook him to his core and challenged everything he thought he knew about the woman he had married. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening, about a month after their wedding. Darius had come home early from work, hoping to surprise Ciara with dinner. As he entered their cozy bungalow, he called out for her, but received no response. Assuming she was still at school, he decided to start on dinner. As Darius moved about the kitchen, he noticed a small tea had fallen behind the refrigerator. Curious, he retrieved it, and realized it didn't match any of the keys they used regularly. His curiosity piqued, Darius began to search for what the key might open. After checking various drawers and cabinets, Darius found a locked box tucked away in the back of their shared closet. The tea fit perfectly. With a sense of trepidation, he opened the box, unprepared for what he would find inside. The box contained documents, birth certificates, medical records, and legal papers. But these weren't just any documents. They told a case that Darius struggled to comprehend. According to these papers, Ciara Harper had been born Oliver Harper. The woman Darius had fallen in love with, the person he had vowed to spend his life with, was transgender. Darius sat on the floor of the closet, surrounded by the scattered papers, his mind reeling. He felt a mix of emotions, shock, confusion, anger, and betrayal. How could Ciara have kept this from him? Why hadn't she trusted him enough to share this part of her past? As Darius grappled with this revelation, he heard the front door open. Ciara's voice called out, cheerful as always, "Darius, are you home early?" In that moment, Darius had to make a decision. Would he confront Ciara immediately, or would he take time to process this information on his own? The choice he made in that instant would set in motion a chain of events that would forever change their lives and the quiet town of Millbrook. Darius quickly shoved the documents back into the box, locked it, and returned it to its hiding place. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself before responding to Ciara. In the bedroom, he called out, his voice cracking slightly, "I'll be right out." As Darius emerged from the bedroom, he saw Ciara in the kitchen, her back to him as she unpacked groceries. She turned to greet him with a smile, but it faltered as she saw the expression on his face. "Darius, is everything okay?" Darius forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just a headache," he lied. "Tough day at work." Ciara's brow furrowed with concern. She crossed the room and placed a gentle hand on his forehead. "You do feel a bit warm. Why don't you lie down, and I'll make you some tea?" Darius nodded, grateful for the excuse to retreat. As he lay in their bed staring at the ceiling, his mind raced. He loved Ciara, of that he was certain. But could he reconcile the person he thought he knew with this new information? And more importantly, could he forgive her for keeping such a significant secret? Over the next few weeks, Darius struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy. He went to work, came home, and went through the motions of married life. But internally, he was in turmoil. He found himself watching Ciara closely, searching for any signs that might have given away her secret. He pored over old photographs, wondering how he could have missed it. Ciara, perceptive as always, sensed that something was wrong. She tried to talk to Darius, to understand what was bothering him, but he deflected her concerns. The distance between them grew, a chasm of unspoken words and hidden truths. Darius began to withdraw from their social circle, making excuses to avoid gatherings with friends. He spent more time at work, volunteering for late nights and weekend shifts. When he was home, he was distant and distracted, often losing himself in thought. The people of Millbrook noticed the change in the once happy couple. Gossip began to circulate. Was there trouble in paradise so soon after the wedding? Some speculated that Darius was having an affair, while others wondered if the stress of small-town life was getting to the big city newcomer. As autumn settled over Millbrook, painting the trees in vibrant shades of red and gold, the tension in the Callahan household reached a breaking point. Darius knew he couldn't continue living with this secret eating away at him. He had to confront Ciara, but he struggled with how to broach the subject. The opportunity presented itself on a quiet Sunday evening. Ciara, unable to bear the silence any longer, finally confronted Darius. "Please," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes, "tell me what's wrong. Whatever it is, we can work through it together." Darius looked at his wife, the woman he had promised to love and cherish. In her eyes he saw fear, confusion, and a desperate hope. Taking a deep breath, he spoke the words that would change everything. "I know about Oliver." The color drained from Ciara's face. She stumbled backwards, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "How? When did you?" she stammered. Darius explained about finding the box, his voice level but strained. As he spoke, he watched a myriad of emotions play across Ciara's face: fear, shame, and finally a resigned sadness. "I wanted to tell you," Ciara said softly, tears now flowing freely. "So many times I came close, but I was afraid of losing you, afraid of how you would look at me if you knew the truth." What followed was a long, painful conversation. Ciara shared her journey, the struggles of growing up feeling trapped in the wrong body, the fear of rejection from her family and community, the years of therapy and transition. She spoke of the joy she felt at finally being able to live as her true self, and the constant anxiety of having to hide her past. Darius listened, his own emotions a turbulent mix of sympathy, anger, and confusion. He understood the fear that had kept Ciara silent, but he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. As the night wore on, it became clear that there were no easy answers. Darius needed time to process everything he had learned, to reconcile the person he thought he knew with this new reality. Ciara, her secret finally revealed, felt both relief and terror at what the future might hold. They agreed that Darius would stay with a friend for a few days, giving them both space to think. As Darius packed a bag, the air was heavy with unspoken words and uncertain futures. Neither of them could have imagined the tragic turn their lives were about to take. The next few days passed in a blur for both Darius and Sierra. Darius stayed with his colleague, Mark, making up a case about renovations at the house. To explain his temporary living situation, he threw himself into work, staying late at the office and volunteering for extra projects, anything to keep his mind occupied. Sierra, left alone in their home, alternated between hope and despair. She reached out to her closest friend Stella, confiding in her about the situation. Stella, shocked by the revelation but steadfast in her support, became Sierra's lifeline during this turbulent time. As the days stretched into a week, the gossip in Millbrook reached fever pitch. In a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, the sudden separation of the newlyweds was prime fodder for speculation. Theories ranged from infidelity to financial troubles, each more outlandish than the last. Darius and Sierra's phones buzzed constantly with well-meaning messages from friends and neighbors, offering support and asking if everything was okay. They both deflected these inquiries as best they could, neither ready to share the truth with the wider community. On the Friday evening, exactly a week after the confrontation, Darius decided it was time to go home and face the situation head-on. He had spent the week soul-searching, trying to reconcile his feelings for Sierra with the sense of betrayal he felt. He still loved her. That much he knew. But could they move past this? Could he truly accept her for who she was, past and all? As Darius drove through the familiar streets of Millbrook, his mind raced with what he would say to Sierra. He had rehearsed various speeches in his head, but none of them felt right. In the end, he decided to speak from the heart and hope for the best. Pulling up to their house, Darius noticed that Sierra's car wasn't in the driveway. It was unusual for her to be out this late on a school night, but he figured she might have gone to Stella's for support. He let himself in, calling out Sierra's name. The house was dark and silent. Darius moved through the rooms, turning on lights as he went. Everything looked normal, untouched since he had left a week ago. As he entered their bedroom, however, something caught his eye. On the perfectly made bed lay an envelope with his name written on it in Sierra's flowing script. With trembling hands, Darius opened the letter and began to read. "My dearest Darius, if you're reading this, it means I've made a decision that I hope you'll understand, even if you can't forgive me. The past week has been the hardest of my life. The fear and shame I've carried with me for so long have finally caught up with me, and I can't bear the thought of losing you or facing the judgment of this town that has been my home for so long. I want you to know that my love for you was real, is real. Every moment we shared, every laugh, every kiss, was genuine. I never meant to deceive you. I only wanted to be loved for who I am, not for who I was. I'm leaving Millbrook. By the time you read this, I'll be far away. Please don't try to find me. This is for the best, for both of us. You deserve someone who can give you honesty from the start, and I need to find a place where I can truly be myself, without fear. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused you. I hope that one day you can look back on our time together with fondness, rather than regret. All my love, Sierra." Darius sank onto the bed, the letter clutched in his hand. A wave of emotions washed over him, shock, anger, sadness, and a surprising surge of panic at the thought of Sierra gone from his life. He read the letter again and again, trying to process what it meant. In that moment, Darius realized that despite everything, he couldn't bear the thought of losing Sierra. The past week had been hell, but the idea of a future without her was unimaginable. He had to find her, to tell her that they could work through this together. Darius sprang into action. He tried calling Sierra's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He called Stella, hoping Sierra might be there, but Stella hadn't seen or heard from her all day. Panic rising, Darius got back in his car and began driving around Millbrook, searching for any sign of Sierra or her car. As he drove, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Sierra was gone, possibly for good, and he had no idea where to start looking for her. The thought of never seeing her again, never having the chance to work things out, filled him with a dread he had never experienced before. Hours passed, and Darius's search yielded no results. Exhausted and emotionally drained, he returned home in the early hours of the morning. As he walked up to the house, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The front door, which he was sure he had locked when he left, was slightly ajar. Heart pounding, Darius cautiously entered the house. "Ciara," he called out, a mix of hope and fear in his voice. There was no response, but as he moved further into the house, he heard a faint sound coming from the kitchen. Darius rounded the corner into the kitchen and froze at the sight before him. Ciara was there, but not as he had last seen her. She was crumpled on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. A knife lay nearby, its blade stained red. For a moment Darius stood paralyzed with shock. Then instinct kicked in. He rushed to Ciara's side, frantically checking for signs of life. Her skin was pale and cold to the touch, but he could feel a faint pulse. With shaking hands, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. The next hours passed in a blur. The quiet night in Millbrook erupted into chaos as police cars and an ambulance converged on the Callahan house. Neighbors, awakened by the commotion, gathered on the street, whispering and speculating about what could have happened. Darius found himself being questioned by the police, trying to explain the events of the past week while still in a state of shock. He told them about the confrontation, about Ciara's secret, about finding the letter and searching for her. The officers listened with growing suspicion, their questions becoming more pointed as Darius's case unfolded. As dawn broke over Millbrook, the full horror of the situation began to sink in. Ciara was in critical condition at the hospital, fighting for her life. And Darius, the devoted husband who had seemed so perfect, was the prime suspect in what appeared to be a brutal attack. The news spread through Millbrook like wildfire. The idyllic small town, which had never seen a crime more serious than petty theft, was now at the center of a scandal that would soon capture national attention. As the investigation unfolded, long-held secrets would come to light, relationships would be tested, and the true nature of acceptance and love would be challenged in ways no one could have anticipated. The days that followed were a whirlwind of police activity, media frenzy, and community shock. Millbrook, once a peaceful haven, had become the epicenter of a national conversation about gender identity, deception, and violence. Darius was taken into custody for questioning, the primary suspect in what the police were treating as an attempted murder. As he sat in the sterile interrogation room of the Millbrook police station, the reality of his situation began to sink in. Detective Stella Lawson, a seasoned investigator brought in from Louisville to handle the high-profile case, studied Darius with a penetrating gaze. "Mr. Callahan," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I need you to walk me through the events of last night again. Every detail matters." Darius, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep and overwhelming stress, took a shaky breath before recounting his case once more. He spoke of finding the letter, his frantic search for Ciara, and the horrifying discovery in their kitchen. With each retelling, he felt as though he was living through the nightmare all over again. Detective Lawson listened intently, her face betraying no emotion. "And you had no idea where your wife might have gone?" she pressed. "No," Darius insisted, his voice cracking. "I thought she might be at her friend Stella's house, but when I called, Stella hadn't seen her." As the interrogation continued, Darius could sense the detective's skepticism growing. The circumstances were certainly suspicious. A husband discovers his wife's secret, they separate, and a week later she's found brutally attacked in their home. Darius knew how it looked, but he clung desperately to the truth, hoping that somehow it would be enough to clear his name. Meanwhile, at St. Mary's Hospital in Louisville, Ciara clung to life in the intensive care unit. The doctors had worked tirelessly to stabilize her, but her condition remained critical. The knife had caused significant internal damage, and she had lost a dangerous amount of blood before help arrived. Ciara's parents, Robert and Margaret Harper, stood vigil by her bedside. They had rushed to the hospital upon receiving the devastating news, their minds reeling from not only the attack on their daughter, but also the revelation of her closely guarded secret. Robert, a tall man with graying hair and a usually jovial demeanor, looked years older as he held his daughter's hand. Margaret, her face etched with worry, alternated between whispering words of encouragement to Sierra and silently praying for her recovery. The Harpers had always known their child was different, but they had never suspected the depths of Sierra's struggle with her identity. As they watched her fight for her life, they grappled with a mix of emotions: fear for Sierra's survival, anger at Darius for potentially causing this tragedy, and guilt for not having recognized or understood their child's true self sooner. Back in Millbrook, the community was in a state of shock. The town that had celebrated Darius and Sierra's wedding just months ago was now divided. Some staunchly defended Darius, unable to believe that the kind, soft-spoken man they knew could be capable of such violence. Others, fueled by the scandalous revelation of Sierra's past, were quick to condemn both Darius for his perceived betrayal and Sierra for her deception. Stella, Sierra's best friend and confidant, found herself at the center of a media storm. Reporters camped outside her house, desperate for any insight into the couple's relationship and the events leading up to the attack. Stella steadfastly defended her friend, refusing to divulge Sierra's secrets or speculate on Darius's guilt or innocence. As days passed, the investigation deepened. Detective Lawson and her team combed through Darius and Sierra's lives, interviewing friends, colleagues, and neighbors. They scrutinized financial records, phone logs, and social media accounts, searching for any clue that might shed light on what had really happened that fateful night. 1 week after the attack, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A gas station attendant on the outskirts of Millbrook came forward with security footage from the night of the incident. The grainy video showed a figure matching Sierra's description entering the store around 10 p.m., looking distressed and purchasing a bottle of whiskey before driving off in the direction of Millbrook. This new evidence cast doubt on the timeline Darius had provided. He had claimed to have returned home around 9 p.m., but if Sierra was seen at the gas station an hour later, it suggested she had left the house after Darius's return, or that Darius had lied about when he came home. Detective Lawson confronted Darius with this new information during another intense interrogation session. "Mr. Callahan," she said, her tone sharp, "how do you explain this discrepancy in your case?" Darius, looking haggard and confused, shook his head. I don't know," he stammered. "Maybe I got the times mixed up. Everything from that night is a blur." The detective's eyes narrowed. "Or perhaps you're not telling us everything, Mr. Callahan. Perhaps there's more to this case than you're letting on." As Darius struggled to reconcile this new information with his memory of that night, the case took another dramatic turn. Sierra, still unconscious and fighting for her life, had an unexpected visitor at the hospital. Her ex-girlfriend, Alex Thompson. Alex, a striking woman with short dark hair and intense green eyes, had driven from Chicago as soon as she heard the news. She identified herself to the nurses as Sierra's cousin, gaining access to the ICU where she now stood, looking down at Sierra's pale, still form. "Oh, Liv," Alex whispered, gently taking Sierra's hand. "What happened to you?" Unbeknownst to Alex, Margaret Harper had stepped out for coffee and returned just in time to overhear this intimate moment. Confused and suspicious, Margaret confronted Alex, demanding to know who she was and how she knew Sierra. Caught off guard, Alex fumbled for words before finally admitting the truth. "I'm Alex Thompson," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Sierra and we were together for 3 years before she moved back to Millbrook." Margaret's world, already tipped on its axis, seemed to spin even faster. Another secret, another layer to her daughter's life that she had never known. As she listened to Alex recount her relationship with Sierra, Margaret felt a complex mix of emotions. Surprise at learning of Sierra's past relationship with a woman. Guilt at not having known this significant part of her daughter's life, and a growing anger at the web of secrets that seemed to have ensnared her family. The arrival of Alex added a new dimension to the investigation. Detective Lawson, upon learning of this development, immediately arranged to interview Sierra's ex-girlfriend. Alex's statement painted a picture of Sierra as a woman who had struggled deeply with her identity, torn between her desire to live authentically and her fear of rejection from her small-town community. "Sierra always talked about going back to Millbrook," Alex explained, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "She loved her hometown, but she was terrified of how people would react if they knew about her past. When she told me she was moving back, I'd begged her to be honest about who she was. But she was convinced that starting fresh, with no one knowing her history, was the only way she could have the life she wanted. As Alex spoke, Detective Lawson felt the case shifting beneath her feet. What had initially seemed like a straightforward, if tragic, case of domestic violence was revealing itself to be far more complex. The detective found herself wondering, could there be more suspects than just Darius? Could Ciara's past have caught up with her in a way no one had anticipated? Meanwhile, in Millbrook, the town was grappling with its own demons. The revelation of Ciara's transgender identity had sparked intense debates about acceptance, privacy, and the nature of truth. Long-standing friendships were strained as people took sides, either defending Ciara's right to privacy or condemning her for what they saw as a betrayal of trust. The local diner, once a place of friendly gossip and community gatherings, had become a battleground of heated arguments and tense silences. The town's annual Harvest Festival, usually a joyous celebration of community spirit, was postponed indefinitely, as the organizers feared it would become a flashpoint for conflict. Amidst this turmoil, a small group of Millbrook residents, led by Stella and the local librarian, Ellen Dawson, began organizing support for Ciara. They arranged a candlelight vigil outside the hospital, drawing a crowd that surprised many with its size and diversity. People from all walks of life came together, united in their hope for Ciara's recovery and their desire for justice, whatever form that might take. As the vigil dispersed, Ellen found herself in conversation with Tom Parker, the town's mayor. Tom, a portly man in his 60s with a shock of white hair, had been uncharacteristically quiet since the news of the attack broke. "Ellen," Tom said, his voice low and troubled, "I've been thinking a lot about Ciara, about our town. I can't help but wonder if we've failed her somehow." Ellen regarded the mayor thoughtfully. "How so, Tom?" "We pride ourselves on being a close-knit community, on knowing and caring for each other," Tom explained. "But did we really know Ciara? Did we create an environment where she felt safe to be herself?" This conversation, overheard by a local reporter, would spark a series of articles examining Millbrook's culture and values, forcing the town to confront its attitudes towards diversity and inclusion in a way it never had before. As Millbrook grappled with these difficult questions, the investigation continued to unfold. 2 weeks after the attack, a crucial piece of evidence emerged. A jogger found a blood-stained knife in Willow Creek Park, about a mile from the Callahan residence. Forensic analysis confirmed it was the weapon used in the attack on Ciara. This discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation team. If Darius was the attacker, why would he dispose of the weapon so far from the scene? And if he wasn't, who was? Detective Lawson ordered a thorough search of the park and surrounding areas. As teams of officers combed through the undergrowth and dragged the creek, they made another startling discovery. A cell phone, water damage but potentially recoverable, hidden beneath a pile of rocks near where the knife was found. As the forensics team worked to extract data from the damaged phone, Darius remained in custody, maintaining his innocence, but unable to provide a convincing explanation for the inconsistencies in his case. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Chen, argued vehemently for his release, citing lack of physical evidence tying him to the attack. "My client has cooperated fully with this investigation," Rebecca stated in a press conference on the steps of the Millbrook courthouse. "He is a victim here too, a man who discovered his wife's secret and is now being persecuted for a crime he did not commit. We demand his immediate release and a refocusing of this investigation on finding the real perpetrator." Public opinion remained divided. While some were swayed by Rebecca's impassioned defense, others felt that Darius's behavior following the discovery of Ciara's transgender identity was suspicious enough to warrant his continued detention. 3 weeks after the attack, Ciara finally regained consciousness. Her first words, barely audible through parched lips, were, "Is Darius okay?" This simple question would add yet another layer of complexity to an already convoluted case. As Ciara slowly recovered, she was able to provide her account of the events leading up to the attack. Her case, however, did little to clarify the situation. She confirmed that she had left the letter for Darius and had intended to leave town. But she also admitted to returning to the house later that night, though her memories of what happened after that were fragmented and confused. "I remember going back to the house," Ciara told Detective Lawson, her voice weak but determined. "I thought I saw Darius's car in the driveway, and I wanted to talk to him one last time, but after that, it's all a blur. I remember a struggle, pain, and then nothing until I woke up here." Ciara's statement, while not exonerating Darius, didn't definitively implicate him either. The detective found herself facing a frustrating lack of clarity. Was Ciara protecting Darius, or was her memory genuinely impaired by the trauma of the attack? As autumn deepened into winter, Millbrook found itself under an uncomfortable spotlight. National news outlets descended on the town, drawn by the sensational combination of violence, secrets, and small-town drama. Residents found their every move scrutinized, their offhand comments dissected for hidden meanings or clues. The pressure began to take its toll. Long-standing friendships fractured under the weight of suspicion and conflicting loyalties. The town's economy suffered as tourists, usually drawn by Millbrook's quaint charm, stayed away, wary of the dark cloud hanging over the community. Amidst this tension, an unexpected voice emerged. Pastor David Mitchell, leader of Millbrook's largest church, delivered a sermon that would resonate far beyond the walls of his congregation. "We have been tested," he began, his voice ringing out over the packed pews. "Tested by tragedy, by secrets, by our own prejudices and fears. But we must remember that at the heart of our faith, at the heart of our community, lies love. Love that accepts, love that forgives, love that seeks to understand, rather than to judge." The pastor's words struck a chord with many in Millbrook. While they didn't erase the divisions that had formed, they did encourage a more nuanced and compassionate dialogue about the issues at hand. As December arrived, blanketing Millbrook in snow, the case took another unexpected turn. The forensics team finally succeeded in recovering data from the cell phone found in Willow Creek Park. The device belonged neither to Darius nor to Ciara, but to a third party, Alex Thompson, Ciara's ex-girlfriend. This revelation cast the entire case in a new light. Why was Alex's phone at the scene? Had she followed Ciara to Millbrook? Was there more to her sudden appearance at the hospital than she had let on? Detective Lawson immediately brought Alex in for questioning. Under intense scrutiny, Alex's carefully constructed case began to unravel. She admitted to having been in Millbrook the night of the attack, claiming she had come to try and convince Ciara not to leave town. "I saw her letter to Darius," Alex confessed, tears streaming down her face. I still loved her. I couldn't bear the thought of her running away again, starting over somewhere new. I just wanted to talk to her to tell her she didn't have to face this alone." But Alex vehemently denied any involvement in the attack itself. "I would never hurt Ciara," she insisted. "I love her. I've always loved her, even when she chose to leave me and go back to Millbrook." As the detective pressed for more details, a clearer picture of that night began to emerge. Alex had indeed come to Millbrook, hoping to reconnect with Ciara. She had seen Darius return home and watched as Ciara arrived later. Hiding in the shadows, Alex had witnessed an argument between the couple, one that had grown increasingly heated. "I wanted to intervene," Alex said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I was scared of what Darius might do, scared of how Ciara would react to seeing me there. So I just watched. And then I heard a scream, and I saw Darius run out of the house. I panicked. I ran too. I'm so sorry. I should have called for help. I should have done something." This new information sent shockwaves through the investigation. Darius was immediately released from custody, though he remained a person of interest. The focus now shifted to understanding the full extent of Alex's involvement and determining whether there might be other suspects who had yet to come to light. As news of these developments spread through Millbrook, the town found itself once again divided. Some felt vindicated in their support of Darius, while others questioned why he had run from the scene if he was truly innocent. The revelation of Alex's presence added fuel to already rampant speculation and gossip. Ciara, still recovering in the hospital, was devastated to learn of Alex's involvement. The realization that her past and present had collided in such a violent way left her grappling with intense feelings of guilt and regret. As Christmas approached, Millbrook was a town on edge. The case that had seemed so straightforward at first had become a complex web of secrets, lies, and unexpected twists. The truth, it seemed, was proving to be far more elusive than anyone had anticipated. The holiday season, usually a time of joy and community in Millbrook, was subdued. The traditional Christmas parade was canceled, and the grand tree lighting in the town square was a muted affair. As snow fell softly on the quiet streets, residents found themselves reflecting on the events of the past months and wondering what the new year would bring. Little did they know, the most shocking revelations were yet to come. As the investigation continued, it would uncover deeper secrets, challenge long-held assumptions, and ultimately force Millbrook to confront truths about itself that would change the town forever. The new year dawned cold and clear in Millbrook, bringing with it a renewed determination to uncover the truth behind the attack on Sierra. Detective Lawson, now assisted by a team of state investigators, began to dig deeper into the backgrounds of all involved parties, leaving no stone unturned. Their persistence paid off when they discovered a series of anonymous emails exchanged between Sierra and an unknown correspondent in the weeks leading up to the attack. The emails, encrypted and carefully hidden, suggested that Sierra had been being blackmailed. The blackmailer, who used the pseudonym Truth Seeker, had threatened to expose Sierra's transgender identity to the town if she didn't pay a substantial sum of money. The emails revealed Sierra's growing desperation as she tried to figure out who was behind the threats and how to protect her secret. This discovery added yet another layer of complexity to the case. Who was Truth Seeker? How had they discovered Sierra's secret? And could they be responsible for the attack? As the investigation into the identity of Truth Seeker intensified, life in Millbrook continued its uneasy course. Sierra, now released from the hospital, found herself at the center of a maelstrom of emotions and opinions. Some townspeople embraced her with open arms, offering support and understanding. Others kept their distance, unsure how to react to her presence. Darius, cleared of direct involvement in the attack but still haunted by the events of that night, struggled to find his place in the town he had once called home. He and Sierra maintained a cautious distance, both unsure of how to move forward in light of all that had transpired. Alex Thompson, released on bail but required to stay in Millbrook pending further investigation, found herself an outsider in a town already on edge. She took a temporary job at the local bookstore, keeping a low profile as she awaited the resolution of the case. As winter slowly gave way to spring, the investigation took an unexpected turn. A routine background check on town officials revealed some irregularities in the financial records of a longtime city council member, Harold Benson. Further scrutiny uncovered a carefully hidden network of offshore accounts and suspicious transactions. At first it seemed unrelated to Sierra's case, but as Detective Lawson and her team dug deeper, they discovered a shocking connection. One of the offshore accounts had received a large payment from an account linked to Sierra, made just days before the attack. When confronted with this evidence, Harold Benson's carefully constructed facade crumbled. In a tearful confession, he revealed a twisted tale of discovery, blackmail, and desperation. Benson admitted to accidentally discovering Sierra's secret years ago when he came across some old medical records during a routine audit of the town's healthcare system. Instead of reporting the breach or confronting Sierra, he had seen an opportunity for financial gain. "I never meant for it to go this far," Benson sobbed during his interrogation. "I just needed the money. My gambling debts were out of control, and I thought I could solve everything with one big payoff." But Benson vehemently denied any involvement in the physical attack on Sierra. "When I heard what had happened, I was horrified," he insisted. "I may be a lot of things, but I'm not violent. I never wanted anyone to get hurt." The revelation of Benson's involvement sent shockwaves through Millbrook. A respected member of the community, someone who had served on the city council for over 2 decades, was now revealed to be a blackmailer. It forced the town to confront the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the greatest threats come from within. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, attention turned back to the night of the attack. If Benson wasn't responsible for the physical assault, who was? The investigators revisited every statement, every piece of evidence, searching for the missing link that would finally reveal the full truth. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Stella, Ciara's best friend, came forward with new information. She had been reluctant to share it earlier, torn between her loyalty to Ciara and her sense of civic duty. But as the case dragged on and the town continued to suffer, she realized she couldn't keep silent any longer. Stella revealed that on the night of the attack, she had received a frantic call from Ciara. She was scared, more scared than I'd ever heard her, Stella told the investigators. She said she had to tell Darius the truth, that she couldn't live with the lies anymore. She was going to meet him at their house. This new information aligned with Alex's account of seeing Ciara return to the house that night. But it also raised new questions. Had Ciara's determination to reveal her secret to Darius been the catalyst for the violence that followed? As the investigation reached its climax, all the key players were brought in for final interviews. Darius, Ciara, Alex, and Harold Benson were all questioned extensively, their stories cross-referenced and scrutinized for any inconsistencies. In the end, the truth that emerged was both simpler and more tragic than anyone had imagined. There had been no single attacker, no carefully planned assault. Instead, a perfect storm of secrets, fears, and misunderstandings had led to a moment of violence that would forever change the lives of all involved. On that fateful night, Ciara had indeed returned home, determined to tell Darius the whole truth. Darius, still reeling from his earlier discovery, had reacted with a mixture of anger and confusion. Their argument had escalated quickly, with years of hidden truths and suppressed emotions bursting to the surface. In the heat of the moment, as Darius and Ciara grappled both physically and emotionally, Alex had burst into the house, having followed Ciara there. Her sudden appearance had startled both Darius and Ciara, causing Darius to accidentally push Ciara. Ciara had stumbled, falling against the kitchen counter and knocking over a knife block. In a tragic accident, one of the falling knives had struck Ciara, causing the near-fatal injury. Panicked and confused, both Darius and Alex had fled the scene, each believing the other had intentionally attacked Ciara. Their flight had only served to make them appear guilty in the eyes of the law and the community. As the full case came to light, Millbrook found itself grappling with a complex mix of emotions. There was relief that the mystery had finally been solved, but also a deep sadness at the senseless tragedy that had unfolded. The town had been changed irrevocably by the events of the past months, forced to confront issues of identity, acceptance, and the dangers of secrets and assumptions. In the aftermath of the revelations, the process of healing began. Charges were filed against Harold Benson for blackmail and breach of privacy, but Darius, Ciara, and Alex were all cleared of any intentional wrongdoing in the attack itself. Ciara, supported by her parents and a core group of friends, chose to stay in Millbrook. Her decision to live openly as a transgender woman sparked important conversations about inclusivity and acceptance in the community. While not everyone was immediately understanding, the town as a whole began to take steps towards becoming a more open and accepting place. Darius, struggling with guilt over his role in the accident and the pain he had caused Ciara, decided to leave Millbrook. He moved to Louisville, where he began working with LGBTQ+ youth organizations, using his experience to help others navigate complex issues of identity and acceptance. Alex returned to Chicago, chastened by her experience and determined to move forward with her life. She and Ciara maintained a cautious friendship, bonded by their shared experiences, but aware that their romantic relationship was firmly in the past. As for Millbrook itself, the town emerged from the ordeal changed but resilient. The experience had forced the community to confront its prejudices and assumptions, leading to the establishment of support groups, educational programs, and a renewed commitment to fostering a truly inclusive environment. The annual Millbrook Harvest Festival, reinstated the following fall, became a symbol of the town's transformation. It now included a diversity celebration, showcasing the varied backgrounds and identities of all community members. The event drew visitors from across the state, curious to see how this small Kentucky town had turned tragedy into an opportunity for growth and understanding. Years later, Sierra would reflect on the tumultuous events that had so dramatically altered the course of her life. In a memoir that became a national bestseller, she wrote, "What happened in Millbrook was a tragedy born of fear, misunderstanding, and the weight of secrets too long kept. But from that tragedy came understanding, growth, and a kind of love I never thought possible. It taught me, and I hope it taught others, that the truth, no matter how difficult, is always preferable to the most comforting lie, and that acceptance of ourselves and others is the greatest gift we can give to our communities and to the world." The case of Millbrook, of Sierra and Darius, of secrets revealed and truths confronted, would long be remembered as a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. It served as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is the potential for growth, understanding, and the triumph of love over fear.